Hi, everybody. It's meteorologist Joe Cioffi on this Thursday, August the 2nd, 2018. And I thought we would spend time today on what is becoming rapidly developing, almost Category 3 Hurricane Hector out in the Pacific. Now, normally we don't devote a whole lot of time to these Pacific systems, but this system looks like it's going to become a major hurricane and perhaps may already be one, judging by how it's been strengthening today on the based on the satellite loops. But it's continuing on this westward course, and looking at weather models and everything else that's going on out in the tropical Pacific, this may wind up being a threat to Hawaii in about 6 or 7 days. So we'll see. There's a lot of variables at play, and of course we're talking 5 to 7 days out here. So a lot of things can happen. And I'll tell you right off the bat, I've seen, over the years, you can go back and you can find a number of major hurricanes that are of Category 3 status or higher when they get to about 150 degrees west, and then they sort of, magically fall apart and weaken by the time they reach the Hawaiian Islands. They seem to always catch a break when it comes to these types of storms. Usually the issue is the ocean water temperatures, which near Hawaii are right around the 80-degree mark. They're just a little bit on the cool side. They're kind of on the edge. So that is one negative as far as the strength is concerned. And there also almost always seems to be something going on out there with respect to wind shear. Either there's a strong upper low north of Hawaii or northwest of Hawaii, and you wind up with unfavorable wind conditions aloft. So there's kind of a let's call it a natural shield to Hawaii. But we'll see what happens this time around. But another reason why I wanted to look at this is because we can compare it in terms of what we're seeing activity-wise on the satellite loops versus what's happening in the Atlantic, which is, on the other side of the scale here as far as activity is concerned. So here's Hector, and the track decidedly to the west, or might even be a shade south of due west here, but it's on a steady course westward. You can see on the enhanced satellite loop that there is a tiny but well-defined eye that is forming, and the hurricane is taking on that circular, symmetric appearance that major hurricanes do, and it continues to plot along to the west. Interestingly, the Hurricane Center has been talking about the fact that many of the models and many of looking at what's going on in terms of the winds aloft out there suggested that there would be some strong shear conditions that would have prevented Hector from strengthening as fast as it has, and lo and behold, it seems to have found a way. So the environment that the hurricane is in a one that's very conducive for development, even though in areas surrounding it, perhaps not quite as conducive for development. Whatever the reason, Hector doing quite well. And it also goes back to something that the Hurricane Center has said many times. And I don't think it takes away at all from their forecasting ability. It's a very, very tough thing. Forecasting intensity is something that they still don't have a complete handle on. Sometimes it looks like these things should strengthen, and they don't. And then there are other times when it looks like these things shouldn't strengthen, and they do. So, it just is, this is the battles that they face. And that's why I've said many times we need to remember that we're talking fluid here, folks, when it comes to this sort of stuff. Here's the wide satellite loop with North America just kind of sitting there in the middle, and you can see the Pacific and the Atlantic on either side. One of the things that stands out rather obviously here, and by the way, thank you, Levi Cowan from Tropical Tidbits. All of this that I'm using tonight is on tropicaltidbits.com. But Look at the activity in the tropical Pacific from Central America on westward. This is their intertropical convergence zone, very, very busy with disturbances along the way. Hector being the lead system here, the one that is furthest to the left, but there are several disturbances now to the right of Hector that may or may not eventually become tropical depressions or tropical storms. The one that is furthest to the east, I think, probably stands a really good chance of becoming a tropical storm or a hurricane, as it eventually just kind of tracks just off the coast of Mexico, moving west-northwestward. But that is for next week. I think, Hector really is what is front and center. But look at the activity in the Pacific and how impressive it is. I'll give you a close-up view here so you can see it better. And, these waves are moving along. Now, look at the Atlantic side. And this is the visible satellite loop. Really, you look at the area in the intertropical convergence zone from the African coast on westward toward the Windward Islands. You have a little bit of activity there going on, but it pales in comparison to what is happening on the Pacific side. Also, note the visible shots at the beginning, north of that area of convection that's along 10 degrees north, that kind of, I guess we could call that a whitish shading there. That is the Saharan dust again that's rearing its ugly head and moving westward with this. So we continue to see the Saharan dust being a problem. Also, go up north of the disturbance that's out in the central Atlantic there. If you go almost straight north of that, you can see there's a spinning counterclockwise rotation. That's a strong upper low. We talked about this days ago, dropping southward in the Atlantic, and that is spinning away. So we have a large area in the tropical Atlantic, the subtropical Atlantic, and in the Caribbean. You can see the clouds in the Caribbean are going from west to east in the upper atmosphere. So we have strong wind shear conditions here, and these are conditions that are not conducive to tropical storm formation. By the way, if you look up in the east coast of the United States, you can see the tropical moisture that continues to stream out of the Gulf of Mexico and on up the eastern seaboard, and you can pick out the shape of the upper trough that runs from the Great Lakes southward along the Mississippi River down to New Orleans. So there's the axis of your trough, and all that tropical moisture that continues to be advected up to the northeast. So that part of the pattern here in the eastern United States will continue for another day or two before it gradually breaks down and the ridge in the Atlantic builds back westward. So let's go back to Hector now, and this is the excuse me, Hurricane Center's forecast. I'm going to update it here very quickly, there we go. So here's the National Hurricane Center's forecast. You can see where the Hawaiian Islands are, and the last position there is 5 days from now. So we're talking Monday, where the storm, where Hector will be a major hurricane at that point, and getting closer to the big island of Hawaii. So the track, to me, suggests, I'm going to even put the 50-knot winds here on the map so you can see that. It stands out a bit better. So we're still not quite at where the gales are close to the big island by the time we get to late Monday or Tuesday, rather. But we're looking probably Tuesday or Wednesday of next week if there's going to be a threat. And at the point that the storm is at its furthest west point here on the 120-hour forecast, that it's still at major hurricane status. We can actually even I'll put the times on here. So the system Monday morning, and then where it is, it's not quite onto the western edge of the gales by Monday evening. But you get the idea here, folks. The track is going to be to the west and then eventually to the west-northwest. How it reacts to ridging that is going to be up to its north is very, very important here. The ridge, and there's also a trough out in the Central Pacific that this is going to interact with, and that'll ultimately determine whether this winds up tracking over Hawaii or to the south of Hawaii, or possibly even turning sooner and going north of the Hawaiian Islands. We can look at what the GFS has to say with all of this and see where it takes us. So I'm starting here with the GFS right into the Central Pacific, and by Saturday, 8 a.m. Saturday, we have Hector into view, still moving westward, and then it starts inching northwestward as we move into Monday morning. The latest GFS still has it. We're now into Tuesday evening. So the latest GFS, it looks like it's going west-northwest and then maybe a little bit more west on that last frame there. Still a hurricane, and at this point, we're at about 149 to 18 and 149, 18 north, 149 west. And the big island of Hawaii is roughly at about 19 and 155. So by Tuesday evening on the GFS anyway, Hector is about 350 miles to the east of the big island of Hawaii. We have another 6 hours out, getting even closer, still on more of a west track on this run of the GFS. I'll go back to the 12Z run where it was... Here's the 12Z run, see where it takes it. And the 12Z actually took it right square over the islands, okay? Please be advised, this is one model, and we've got a long way to go as far as whether this thing is ultimately going to have an impact on Hawaii or not. Again, this is the prior run. So the prior run has it, looks like goes right over Oahu and Honolulu. So here's the big island. We'll go to the 6Z, and the 6Z actually was a little bit further to the north for the same time frame. We'll go back to the 0Z last night, and the 0Z was actually southwest of that run, but the positions are fairly close here. And 18Z, we're not out far enough yet. We're at 132 hours. So what's going on in the upper atmosphere, which we will now take a look. And in fact, you know what? I'm going to put this on the paint box so we can look at it that way. So here's the upper air. All right, so here's your upper air. And you're not seeing enough of it, but I'll get a bit of a wider view. I thought I'd get tight here first before we go to something a bit wider. So here is your, right here, northwest of the Hawaiian Islands, we've got an upper high, not the strongest ridge in the world, but we sort of have this narrow east-west ridge out in the Pacific, and here's the we'll outline the ridge itself. So it appears that Hector is under the influence of this upper high. There is a trough right in here, and we also have a deeper trough extending from the northeast Pacific on southward, but neither one of these looks to be having any impact on Hector at this point. The trough that's out further to the west in the Pacific is something that might erode this ridge, and if it erodes the ridge faster, that would then perhaps cause Hector to turn more northerly and go north of the islands. If it doesn't do that and the ridge is stronger, then we could wind up with a track that is going to just continue basically west or west-northwest and either pass over or south of the islands. But as each day goes by, I think we're getting a better sense here of whether this is going to be a threat or not. And I think what we'll have to do is just basically wait until probably Saturday. That'll give us, I think Saturday will probably give us the best clue. with regards to whether this is going to be a problem or not. I'm going to go to the 500 of the North Pacific and show you this. This is really kind of cool, actually. But we'll come back to the paint box for now, so you can at least see how this is all in the grand scheme of things. Okay, and what you have. Okay, so yeah, here's Hector. Let me just show you what's actually showing up here. So here's Hector right there. Okay, here's the next system off the coast of Mexico, and then there's a weaker one that's kind of in between that. I don't know if that winds up doing anything or not. Here's your upper ridge. Okay, and you also have an upper ridge in the Central Pacific, but there is a weakness that extends southward right in here. So you've got a weak trough separating three upper highs, actually. One that's north of the islands. Here's another one that's out to the west, west of the date line. Okay, and you also have a cutoff low and deep trough in the eastern Pacific moving toward the Pacific Northwest. So it seems like Hector is, at least at this point, which is time-wise next Tuesday night, kind of being shielded by that small upper high that is north of the Hawaiian Islands. So I think, the weakness, the trough that's to the west of that, it's a weak trough. Is it enough to weaken that upper high to turn Hector more toward the north a bit sooner? The big upper low that's up well east of the coast of Northern California and Oregon, I don't know that trough extends far enough south where it would exert an influence on Hector a bit sooner. It seems like it's already bypassed it to the east, and if that's the case, then Hector will probably continue to move along on its merry way, in terms of its track. So let me come back to the GFS map now, and we can move it along. So there's out to 144 hours. Let me just come back, and you can see how the storm reacts. Look how small it is there. And there's this upper low that's dropping southward from off the northeast Pacific, but there's a ridge right in between that prevents that Hector from responding to that upper low, and that ridge kind of holds. So by the time we get to next Wednesday here, this is next Wednesday afternoon, we've got Hector pretty much sitting over the Hawaiian Islands, or getting very close to move over the Big Island. So again, this is the new run, not really that inconsistent with the prior run. It looks like the track might, I think what we're going to start seeing here is the storm adjusting a little further south or a little further north. At least we know what we have to look for as far as the keys to all of this are concerned. So the other thing I wanted to mention, by the way, is Colorado State University. Anthony Orr mentioned this to me today, that their updated seasonal forecast is up, and they continue to pull back because of the fact that we have the cooler than normal ocean water temperatures in the tropical Atlantic, and the just general lack of activity, the strong wind shear conditions that seem to be showing up in the tropical Atlantic. They cut their storm totals down to 12 for the whole season, and since we've had 3, basically saying that we would have 9 more, 3 of them will become hurricanes, and 1 possibly could become a major hurricane. And they are looking at past seasons like 1994, 2002, I think they said in the article. You can Google it. If you Google Colorado hurricane forecast, Colorado State University, you can read the article. But they put up their analog years, and those were all years that had subnormal activity. Please remember that just because it's subnormal doesn't mean that it has nothing to do with whether a storm is going to make landfall or not. So you could have a subnormal year and still wind up with a major hurricane hitting the coast someplace. Hurricane Andrew is a perfect example of that in 1992. Category 5 hurricane in a year where the total activity was subnormal. So the two don't necessarily go together, and you could look at a lot of years between 2000 and 2015 or 16 where we had above normal activity in the Atlantic and not very many hurricanes making landfall. So it sort of works both ways. And then you've got years like 2005 where major hurricane after major hurricane was making landfall, and then you go 10 years without seeing a hurricane making landfall in the Gulf of Mexico. It's all this cyclical stuff that goes on. Okay, let's go back and look at where we're going in the pattern as far as the weather is concerned in the east. We're still dealing with all this rain and downpours and thunderstorms. It's been almost, well, I wouldn't quite say unrelenting, at least up in my area. They seem to be just occurring in the afternoon and evening hours, but some areas are seeing more of it, thunderstorm activity than others, but it's confined to the East Coast. And what we're going to have is a wash, rinse, repeat day on Friday. Now, Saturday, we begin the process of getting rid of this upper trough in the east, and we're going to go to a ridge position in the eastern part of the United States. So this should start to diminish thunderstorm activity, particularly Sunday and Monday. And we'll probably see temperatures with more sunshine climbing up into the 90s. The next cold front will arrive probably late Tuesday or Tuesday night, and it looks like it may try and get hung up a bit off the East Coast. So while it might bring in a slight break to the humidity, which continues to be a big problem, I don't think it's going to bring a serious break to this until maybe later next week, when a more important front tries to come through late next week and into next weekend. So that at least is how the GFS is playing it. We can look at this from the standpoint of the upper air, and we can I'll show you how the trough, just how we go from trough to ridge. And let's go back just a little bit. Well, here's our trough now, and the axis basically from Chicago to New Orleans, your big upper high sitting well off the Virginia coast. That high starts to build back westward. The trough disappears over the weekend, and now you've got this ridge along the east coast, off the southeast coast of the United States. It's not a particularly strong ridge, but at least it's strong enough to get rid of that trough. And then it starts to weaken and merge with the ridge out in the west, and the next trough drops in Tuesday and Wednesday of next week into the east, and then another one follows it at the end of next week. So we again seem to be in the pattern that we've been in for all of the summer, at least when it comes to heat and consecutive days of 90-degree weather. We can't seem to string together more than 2 to 3 days of 90-degree plus weather for many areas in the Northeast. And the reason for that is this, persistent troughing that wants to keep dropping down into the eastern part of the United States, and that basically cuts the heat off. So the bottom line is we're going to finally at least get out of this the thunderstorm part of all of this, and get to a better place from the standpoint of trying to dry things out with less rain. However, we are going to see our temperatures get nudged up as we go into the weekend. Okay, Aaron Raybear, thanks for hitting Super Chat, sir. Most appreciated. Cup of coffee for me right after I'm done. Did anyone catch the ridiculous statement, the Bill Keneally, by the governor of California, calling it the worst heat wave since civilization began? It's amazing to me that we get these, the hyperbole and the statements that we get. My immediate question when somebody says something like that is, could you show me the data? Okay, show me the data. All right, you've got the governor here in the People's Republic of the state of New York, by the way, Andrew Cuomo, who apparently is a climatologist and has said that New York never used to get hurricanes before, never used to get snowstorms before back in the day in the 1800s. Just never happened. This is where this is where you have to kind of take a step back and, fact check these people when they say stuff like this. One of the issues in California, and this is not just in California, but in a lot of places, the coast, the East Coast is guilty of this, Florida, and so on. They're building they're building in places where they never used to build before. Okay, so when we get these fires, which happen, okay, this is part of the landscape of the West. The fires actually serve a purpose in helping the seeds of many of the pine trees to germinate. The heat from the fires causes the cones to burst, and new trees come from all of this. This stuff has been happening all the time, and we're seeing, homes being built in areas where they never used to build homes before, or rebuilding where prior fires have taken their toll. So, I think we kind of need to look at that. And in the East, same thing, building on beaches, building on, in coastal areas where tidal flooding is a big problem. That is, I guess that's a choice that people make. And, of course, then they pay insurance through the nose in order to protect their investments. But, we kind of need to look at that and say, should we be building here? Should we perhaps build someplace else? I think that's a legitimate question. But the idea that these are the worst fires since civilization began, yeah, that's a bit off the charts, but typical. Local forecasters Johnny Quest and Doppler, we had rain rates at 3 inches an hour, over 5 inches since Wednesday, and that taking care of the 3.44 inches of rain average for August. So you're already done. Up you go, and you've got another flood warning up. Unbelievable. Yes, the governor needs to show his birth certificate. Big heat for the East coming back Wednesday. Sunday, Monday, Tuesday will be in the 90s. I don't know if it's going to last much past that. And by the way, the GFS model apparently is having its issues again with regards to how it's dealing with temperatures and that. So we're basically ignoring it and going for lower numbers than what the model has. Certainly the wet conditions and the high soil moisture content would argue for lower highs than what the model is showing. But I certainly think it could be the warmest spots should at least get up into the low or even the middle 90s. Let's see. Hawaii getting hit by a buzzsaw that is not as good, especially with the volcanic activity. Well, Aaron Raybear, let's not go down that particular road yet, because as I said at the beginning, if you look back at some of the notable hurricanes that have come out of the Eastern Pacific and made their way westward, something seems to happen to them when they go west of 150 west. Either it's the cooler ocean water temperatures, which, by the way, are running a bit above normal there near and around the Hawaiian Islands, so that is something to consider. It's either the water temperatures or it's the upper air environment, because oftentimes there is some kind of upper low running around somewhere producing strong upper air winds and wind shear conditions that that weaken these systems. It's one of the reasons why, in spite of the fact of where it is in the tropical Pacific there, you don't get a lot of storms that are generated in that part of the Pacific Ocean. What's going on in the northern part of the Pacific Ocean kind of cuts down on the development. As I said, you get these upper lows in the central Pacific that extend southward and go and bring strong wind shear conditions pretty far south in the Pacific, down to south of 20 degrees north. And you get these systems that form from time to time. And there have been stretches, by the way, where we've seen no tropical storms or hurricanes actually form in the Central Pacific. There have been some 2 and 3 year dry stretches. We had one recently, in fact, where we didn't see any named tropical systems form in the Central Pacific, south of the Hawaiian Islands. That is separate from the ones that form in the East Pacific, and the ones that form in the Central Pacific have their own rotating name list that Hawaii, the Hurricane Center office in Hawaii, handles. So anyhow, let me just come back to the very beginning I want to say hi to Frank the Tank. Good to see you. So you jumped on at the beginning. And yes, already a Cat 2. Probably is already, pretty close to a Cat 3, or will be a Cat 3 on the next advisory. And Javed on Oahu came here for an update. Oh, you're there right now. Oh, very good. Well, you know what? While it's out there and it's the only tropical system that's around, we're going to, of course, keep abreast of it over the next couple of days, and we'll see how it evolves. Aaron Raybear, Hurricane Aniki. Yes, very good. Joe Rayo and I were talking about Hurricane Aniki on the Joe and Joe show last night. Coming back to us Wednesday. Hope the intense heat is over by then. It should be, Israel. We'll probably have that cold front come through on Tuesday. I don't know how much cooler it's going to be. It may not be all that cool next Wednesday and Thursday. You may have to deal with residual warm temperatures and humidity for a couple of days before we start to see the humidity come down. Maybe next weekend will be a good time frame to look at as far as the lower humidity is concerned. All right, folks, I'm going to call it a night at this point. Thanks for being here as always. We can let you know that we'll have the Joe and Joe weather show tonight, 9 o'clock on average. Sometimes we do it earlier than 9, sometimes a bit later. That's on my Facebook page, meteorologist Joe Cioffi, and on Joe Rayo's Facebook page, Joe Rayo Weather. Also, the links to Amazon and eBates on the descriptor to this live stream, and the video descriptor that shows up later on. We're a participant in the Amazon Services LLC program, and also the eBates affiliate program. If you use the links and do a little shopping, you get your stuff. You can get cash back with eBates on virtually every major retailer around, and they throw back a little bit of coin to me, and it's a good way to support my channel, and it doesn't cost you an extra dime. Thank you so much for those of you who have done that, and thank you, Aaron Raybear, for hitting Super Chat tonight. Really, really appreciate it greatly. I'm trying to think if there's anything else going on, and there isn't. So tomorrow is Friday. We're at the end of the week. Hey, these summer weekends, we've got what? This weekend looks like 3, 10, 17, 24, 5 weekends. The 5th weekend is a Labor Day weekend, if I did my math right. So slowly but surely running out of time here before we get into the autumn months. But let's not rush it. It's only August 2nd. Have a great evening, everybody. Please be safe, and we will talk to you either later on Facebook or tomorrow right here on my YouTube channel.